Charles. Please give him a warm welcome.
Well, good evening, everyone. I've been, as just been introduced, in the oil industry for 25 years, and during that time I've worked for about 150 clients worldwide, and I was doing about 2 countries a month on drilling and well control. Now, most of the stuff, of course, was with conventional drilling and conventional gas, and of course, when fracking came along, it wasn't in the UK, it was in America, and there were plenty of horror stories there, and also in Australia. And I've been to something like 60 countries, over 60 countries. So I saw the horror stories over there, and I never thought we would have a British government that would allow fracking, but we have. So I decided to start giving talks in the UK. Unfortunately, just as I did so, I got throat cancer. But our lovely hospital in Poole fixed that, and I'm going back to doing it again. But the sort of thing that you're going to see on here really are the voices of people who have been affected by these things. And it's very much the same sort of story that you'll hear wherever you go. Because fracking, the sheer quantity of wells that are involved in fracking is far above anything that's done in conventional drilling. It's about 14 wells per square mile. Now the leakages that you get from drilling 14 wells per square mile, just apart from the failure of well bores, which is 6 to 7% in 3 years. Now when you get that over the quantity of wells that you're drilling in fracking, then a lot of gas escapes, and there are some very nasty chemicals. The sort of things that you see here, within a mile of radius of any gas well, you tend to hear stories like the one you're going to hear now. So multiply that by the sheer quantity of wells that are around. Now America has to drill 7,200 new wells every year just to keep the level of gas flowing at 2011 quantities. So the quantity of wells is enormous. And this sort of story is widespread. We're not hearing about it from the press, because I don't know what stops the press from saying these things, because it's certainly broadcast in America, but they've got lots of independent channels. So it's a very good thing that filmmakers are producing this, and I'm very pleased to see that someone is putting it on. But these are very much the sort of voices we could be hearing in Dorset if we allow this to go ahead. So without further ado, I'll let the presentation begin. Thank you.
Shale gas is part of the future, and we will make it happen.
I'm charged with, without lawful authority or excuse, obstructing the highway. Well, I believe I have lawful excuse.
We're going to take very great care that there is no damage to the water supply.
Gas at Barton Moss contaminated the well site. Then Rathlin Energy were responsible for considerable property damage as a result of their seismic testing.
There is a fishing lake which started to go down immediately following the detonation of these charges.
I think there's a huge amount of myths that are being put round in order to frighten people.
The first person that signed a well was the person that doomed us to this. An unconventional gas well isn't a pipe out of the ground. With it comes all of the drilling and the destruction. That's a hectare. Plus tracks, compressor stations, water holding ponds.
So we're right in the middle of the Australian bush here. Well, it was once bush.
We take a strip literally 520 kilometres for this one company. We sit on the Great Artesian Basin, one of the greatest water resources in the world, and they are allowed to deplete it and turn it to trash.
There used to be a beautiful green lawn with roses in it. 3 nights of rain, it was dead. Each time it rains, it just comes up black.
You're genuinely so scared of what is happening. It's untrustworthy and it's running out.
This is called a high point vent. That'll have everything in it.
The benzene, the toluene, the ethyl benzene.
Everything.
When your nose is burning, your eyes are burning, and you got that terrible oily sort of taste, I said, you know, the flares are not, they're just venting. Then other times, it's like little fibres in your throat, you know, the flare is on.
The majority of people that have visited us, they say, how can you live there? You know.
Right, thank you everyone for coming along and watching the film with us. I haven't seen it myself until tonight, and I'm sure you would agree that a lot of the material in there is quite troubling. In a moment, Charles will be available to answer any questions if you've got any kind of technical questions and concerns about what you've seen tonight. But we thought it would be useful if I just said a few words before that about what you can do about the threat of fracking. Because we don't want to send you all away feeling kind of depressed about the prospect that it might come here and not give you some action. Now, our local MP in North Dorset, Simon Hall, tells me that we've already lost the battle on fracking. And I'm sure most of you will join me in disagreeing with him and saying that actually it hasn't even started yet. We haven't even had the opportunity to have our say, particularly in Dorset, but really across the country. So the first thing that we would really encourage you to do is not to wait until any of the licences that have been sold become planning applications, but to actually start to take action now. Because one of the messages that was really strong in the film was that if you leave it too late, you really will have missed your opportunity. Here in Dorset, the minerals planning authorities will be the County Council, the Borough of Poole and Bournemouth Borough Council, because those are both unitary authorities. So the first thing that we would encourage you to do is write to Dorset County Council, or if you live in the Borough of Poole or Bournemouth area, then your relevant unitary authority. Just to let them know what you think about the prospect of fracking coming to our county, but also to ask them what they're going to do to ensure that it doesn't. There are template letters that you can find online or in the fracking packs that we've got at the back. There are tips on what you can include in these letters. And if anybody needs any sort of help digging out who their local representative contact details are, then there's a website called writetothem.com, which will list not just your local county councillors, but also district councillors, MPs, MEPs, and so on, and all their contact details. Although the District Council will not be the body that takes decisions over fracking planning applications, they will obviously be consulted. So there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't write to your district councillors as well, or parish councillors for that matter, particularly if you live in one of the areas where a licence has been issued. It might be useful for me to just outline a little bit of information about the licences that have been issued in the area. I think there were 159 licences issued across the country last year. 22 of those are in Dorset, Somerset and Wiltshire. 9 of those are in Dorset. And we believe that 3 of them will be likely to have a direct impact on people living in villages and towns in North Dorset. The closest one is actually at Sturminster Marshall. Now, it is important for me to say that the fact that those licences have been issued doesn't automatically mean there's going to be fracking in the county. There obviously are many stages that they'll have to go through before that happens. The first thing is that they'll have to get planning permission to do exploratory drilling, and that also doesn't preclude them from having to get planning permission to actually do the hydraulic fracturing later. And they'll also have to get environmental permits from the Environment Agency. So you can see there are lots of opportunities for us to influence. At the moment, the Environment Agency have a consultation out on guidance for applications for permits. So you could look that up on their website and maybe contribute your comments to that process as well. I believe the consultation closes in March. Other things that you can do is join a local frack-free group. There is a frack-free Dorset group already, but we're also finding that various district groups are now being started. And there is a sign-up sheet at the back of the room on the table for anyone that would be interested in joining a North Dorset group and helping to mobilise communities locally. There's also the County of Dorset petition at the back here, and again that's available online as well if you'd like to share it on your social media. So I'd encourage you to consider signing that before you leave tonight. And please do help yourself to any of the materials that are at the back of the room in terms of posters, wheelie bin stickers, postcards that you can send to the county leader of the county council and so on. If you want to organise your own fracking events, you can also get loads of free materials from the Friends of the Earth website. That's where we got most of ours from. I think some of them from Greenpeace as well. Just helping to raise awareness about this issue with your friends, neighbours, family, landowners that you need, that you know, that would be obviously a really good place to start. And to look out for any planning applications, consultations and so on that might come forward in the future, and make sure that you contribute your views at that stage. So that's probably enough in terms of a few actions to be getting on with, and obviously we'll be feeding information through the North Dorset frack-free group on further actions that you could take as we go forwards. But before we finish tonight, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to ask any questions from Charles, if you do have any. It's not very often that you get a previous oil and gas industry professional come along to talk at an event that's about opposing fracking, so we're really lucky to have his expertise here tonight.
Can I just ask, you talk about licences?
Okay, so basically the UK government has drawn a grid all over the map of the UK and divided it up into squares, and those have been offered up for oil and gas companies to bid for. And just before Christmas they were awarded, which means that they have basically been now awarded to particular oil and gas companies in return for a fee, I believe. Charles probably knows more about the process than I do. That's the first stage in the process. Now, those licence blocks are issued by the Oil and Gas Authority, which is, has delegated responsibility from the Department of Energy and Climate Change. And they basically are the thing that you need to be able to do any kind of oil and gas exploration in that area. So it's the first stage in the process, basically. Now, in some areas, they may lead to other forms of oil and gas exploitation, and some of them will lead to fracking. Some of them may lead to other forms of unconventional gas extraction as well. So it's basically the kind of first stage in the process that the companies have to go through.
There's a map at the back.
Yeah, and there's a map at the back which shows where those licence blocks are. Yeah, now on the table by the T. So can I hand over to Charles, and if anyone has any more questions, we'll do our best to answer between us.
Just to say one thing, so very quickly before we start, we're not really given any opportunity to actually have a say on fracking. It's not brought up as an electoral issue anywhere, so you can't vote on it. We don't actually have a say at all. And if the government wants to go ahead with fracking, when they have a consultation, they don't have to listen to any of the views in the consultation. And when you read Osborne's leaked paper, which I do actually have with me tonight, when you read his paper, it's pretty obvious that they're going to go ahead. He's putting teams into councils, effectively, to tell them how to say yes to an application. So it is going to go ahead. It is obvious that it's going to be down to people to get together to stop it. And there's an organisation worldwide called 350.org, and I've joined it, and I've set up a petition to contact all the councillors in Dorset So that's just newly set up, and we'll get the information out. But that means that you do have a voice going to all the councillors. We're getting a list of all the councillors in Dorset together, and we'll get all the petitions will go to those people, so that we are trying to create a voice when we don't actually have one electorally. Now, as members of the electorate, we should, of course, have a way of voting for these things, but we don't. We actually vote for an MP. And when you think that there's about 70 million people in the UK, and we have only 650 MPs, and they're planning to cut that down to 600, then, and it's only those people who can make a decision, and they're sitting up in Westminster, getting all sorts of jobs from industries like this, we don't really stand much of a chance of getting fair play. So, setting up organisations where we can directly petition our own councillors should be a much more effective way, so that we can try and persuade them to do something about it. So I hope you all join in. But there'll be lots of other moves by all these different organisations, and we ought to try and join and support them all. So please give them a chance as well.
Before we take the first question at the back there, could I also just highlight something that was in the media only today? I think I saw it on a link somebody shared to a Telegraph report, but it was published in various different media, that the government's latest great idea is that they may take the decision out of the hands of the minerals planning authorities or the county councils and actually appoint an unelected planning inspector to take decisions. So, you know, yet again, another example of how, as Charles says, you know, they seem to be moving forward and trying to make it as difficult as possible for us to have our say. But I don't want that to discourage you from trying. Many people know that I work with Molly Scott-Cato, who is our MEP for the South West Green Party. And, you know, an individually written letter carries an awful lot of more weight than if you just go to 38 degrees or something and click on their automatic letters. And equally a petition tailored for the county of Dorset carries a lot more weight than some of the kind of national petitions that elected representatives do get bombarded with. So just bear that in mind as well.
Yes, right.
The lady at the back has a question in red.
Actually, the question I was going to state precisely what you've just stated that I read in the Telegraph. But the way that they're going to do it is they're going to declare the oil industry infrastructure as of national interest, and therefore the decision will be made, as you say, by an unelected person in government. This isn't the first time we've heard this, actually. It's been rattling around for some months, and now that it's appeared in the Telegraph, yes, I think we could pretty much say that that is what's going to happen. Because when we campaigned up in Lancashire recently and successfully got the Lancashire government, Lancashire Council to throw out the application at the planning stage, they were so enraged that this will be their next move.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. What I would say though is that my understanding is that that would require a change in law. So, you know, now is the time to write to your MP and express how disappointed you would be, particularly given the fact that our government has made a commitment to devolution to communities in terms of decision making, and that is completely contrary to their own stated manifesto position. So again, that's a really excellent point to bring up if you do write to your elected representatives.
Well, we effectively have something like that in operation now, because when Surrey and Lancashire County Council objected, they were taken to appeal, and an inspector then judges the appeal. Well, now, that's the end of democracy, because the inspector isn't elected. Now, in the cases where the inspector agreed with the county council, it then goes to the High Court, and the High Court says it's a government instruction, and that's the end of the matter. So democracy just doesn't get anywhere. Now, this is the same sort of experience that's happened in America. There's no democracy. Now, townships were very good in America at getting together, and they're much more effective than we are in the UK. We're very complacent. We're miles behind. But they unfortunately left it too late. we shouldn't be too late. We must get this thing going very, very quickly. And the faster we get this opposition going and make sure that they can see us out on the streets or going to any site and opposing it, that's going to be effective, because we don't have a democratic means of doing it.
Yeah, and many of us, those who I know, already signed a pledge that we are prepared to take non-violent direct action if it comes to it in the county, and you can find that pledge online as well. And I'm sure Joe, who organised this event tonight, will be able to share that on the Facebook page as well.
Question. Are there any legal means of delaying or stopping fracking in its tracks? You know, human rights legislation, climate change legislation, anything that can throw a spanner in the works? You know.
We're currently researching that at the moment, actually, and Joe, I think, posted a paper only today on the Dorset County No Fracking Way Facebook page about some of the legal courses of action. If you go on the Friends of the Earth website and order their, I think they call it an action pack, one of the things that you get in that action pack, which I haven't brought with me tonight, unfortunately, is a leaflet about how you can use your opportunities during the planning process to oppose this, and also a leaflet with links to resources about the legal arguments. But one crucial thing is that landowners, engagement with landowners to make sure that they're not keen to accept the incentives.
I mean, I'm just thinking, it's such a lazy, incompetent government. It wouldn't surprise me if they hadn't thought of something, or there's some legislation that would stop it that they haven't even looked at. So.
Yeah, you're quite possibly right. I mean, and if anyone's got any legal knowledge, training, or expertise, then do kind of put your hand up now, volunteer to help us look into it. I mean, it is something we're looking into, but my background's in environmental management. I'm afraid I don't.
I'm an IT tech. So.
Yeah, maybe to anyone when it comes to
Well, actually, unfortunately, they have the experience in America, and one of the things is commercial in confidence. And of course, the Halliburton loophole. All these things are well and truly in place. A lot of this is driven by the Americans, Codrilla and other things, and we've been looking into the one down in Swanage, and watching as behind the scenes, it's begun to grow, and you can see their footprints and fingerprints by what's going on in the corporate structures of these companies. It started off as a small one, it's getting bigger and bigger. And now we've got an American company in, and Chinese money. So you can see it all growing out of sight. Now these things don't come up anywhere that you can actually deal with them. They're commercial in confidence.
So we should be hoping for a Chinese recession then, so they pull the cash.
But it is very difficult to deal with. They've got a lot of organisation, they've got lots of the procedures that America has tried and tested. Whereas we, as the public, who are going to have this amongst us, really have nothing. We've got to start it all from scratch, just like the Americans and the Australians are doing.
So it sounds like targeting the landowners is a key strategy to blocking this, getting them.
It's certainly engaging with landowners. Yeah, would be a good place to start, particularly if you know any landowners personally in the areas affected. Gentleman here to start.
Just that I'd love to gobble along to my MP and hand him a copy of that film and say, right, let's just look at this, and then ask him what he thinks about it. Is that available? And if so, how much or whatever?
Joe, where did you get it? Okay, so it's Ian Crane, the chap that produced this film, sells it directly from his website for $6.99. There's also a shorter trailer version of it available on YouTube, which you might have more luck getting Mr. Hall to sit down and watch. So you might want to start with.
Sorry, can you say how much it costs?
$6.99.
We need something which is pretty much for a quid that people can afford buying fine. So it just has to be.
Ladies at the back, with videos.
I can answer that question. You can get them on YouTube. The best one on YouTube is called The Dash for Gas.
Yeah.
It's made by Frack Free Somerset. and it's been online for a year now, and it's brilliant. It's the best one because it does include an awful lot of information from America and Australia.
Okay, great.
And there are lots more actually. If you just type in frack into YouTube search engine, you'll find there's absolutely loads of material there.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, actually, that's something we as organisers ought to be getting together on and creating a database of all these things. So perhaps we can do that.
Also, Penny, you've got a Netflix subscription. The film Gasfields is available on Netflix as well. It's a slightly older film, about an hour and a half. You've been very patient with that. Sorry.
I was just wondering if any of the legislators are on Crown land. What's the legislation, if any of them are on Crown land?
On Crown land, okay.
Or Crown State land?
I don't know the answer to that, I'll be entirely honest. I have to look into that, but it's a good avenue for us to pursue. But given some of the parts of Dorset that are affected, I suspect the answer might be yes.
Well, because obviously, I see from the map, a lot of that area is obviously the Isle of Ladback as well, which is a big tourist destination, let's face it. So, but there's Crown land around Bamford, so presumably there's Crown land over that way as well.
Yeah, I think that's a useful question, and we need to go in and look into that basically.
Well, I'd like to ask, Charles, why do you think the government are pursuing this line? Given the fact that it's not a green energy, given the fact that, this isn't the only film I've seen, we know how bad it is. I mean, it's suicide really for us. Why do you think they are prepared to ride roughshod over everybody and everything to do it?
Well, that's a question we all ask. And one of the theories is that they've already signed the TTIP agreement, because this has got a lot of American fingerprints on it. And when you look at the sort of organisation that's gone on behind and the sort of tactics they're using and the pressure that's going ahead, you would think that when the oil price is this low, they'd be backing off. And now that renewable energy is cost competitive, they would be going for renewable energy, because that takes us away from all the sort of problems of fossil fuels. But they're not. So something is driving it forward.
I think there are a number of things there actually. First of all, my perception is that we actually just don't have a comprehensive energy policy for this country going forward. For some reason, the current government seems to have an ideological obsession against renewable energy, particularly wind, but not exclusively wind, which partly explains why they have withdrawn or reduced the subsidies from renewable energy much earlier than planned and much more dramatically than planned, which has really been devastating for the renewable energy industry and particularly the solar industry, in fact. But apart from that, I really can't begin to imagine what's going through our government's mind on a lot of issues. So I probably need to ask you everything
I
that
thought there was an indication that it's for burying nuclear waste in from France.
Well,
that's got a really neat ring to it.
Yes, I'll come to that in a minute. Can I take that gentleman back?
It's become a noticeable within the law on fracking that was written by the fracking companies that they will be dumping radioactive waste down these wells. Not only that, but nanoparticles and possibly a biocide. Many of you know what a biocide is. It literally kills life. There is nothing that lives there.
Yes, in fact, one of the things we've long suspected is that the government wants to put nuclear waste down fracking wells, and they're already putting all the waste from fracking wells down more wells. So there are waste wells to dump the material from the fracking wells. Now, fracking seams or shale seams are actually compressed river mud and sea silt. And as you compress it, you raise its natural background radiation level, and it's highly compressed. And so that raises the background, the radiation level of a shale bed well above the background. And that's actually how we find it. We put scintillation counters down with the drill bit, down with the drill stem, and that tells us when we've reached radioactive seams, and also the material coming back up is radioactive. And we've got radioactive pits that the radioactive material goes into. But of course it has to be disposed of. So they drill other wells elsewhere, not into the seams, to bury it all. Now, with nuclear waste, we are planning currently to build some more nuclear power stations. We already hold the largest stockpile of plutonium in the world, and we're going to generate even more of it. And we haven't heard a squeak about where all this radioactive material is going to go or how it's going to be processed. So we virtually know in advance that the same technique is going to be used. We now see, fairly recently in the press, that they have got a scheme. Somebody has come up with an idea that if you put all the radioactive waste down a well into a sort of pencil, it'll be so heavy that it will work its way down towards the centre of the Earth, which is radioactive anyway. Now this is a wonderful scheme, but it's probably the sort of thing that will cover the activity of burying nuclear waste, and as well as the sort of hazardous waste that comes from these wells, because there are about 360 something chemicals that are used by the fracking industry. 71 of those chemicals have got 10 or more serious health effects. And I've got a list of all those chemicals.
Have these chemicals been licensed by the UK?
Sorry?
Have these chemicals been licensed by the UK?
No, and they're protected by commercial in confidence, because they're embodied into other chemicals which then have a chemical name. The chemical company calls it something and it becomes commercial in confidence because they can protect their sources. So when we hear that the UK government say that they're getting lists of the chemicals, we won't be getting those lists. And in any case, it'll be the same as they do in America. The names that they publish will be meaningless because they're commercial names. And what's actually the constituents are secret. Commercial in confidence is a big problem.
Did you have your hand up at the front? No, you're just gesticulating. It's fine, sorry, carry on.
I read an article recently that said in the States they're using the wastewater from the fracking to wash roads and streets by certain authorities. Is that actually true? As a way of disposing of this wastewater from the fracking process?
I doubt it very much.
No, I've got that same answer. Basically, they banned them doing that in 2 states because what comes up is brine, basically. They've been using it as a de-icer on the roads. And there's regulations to say, that they can't spray it on roads that are so close to water sources. But they have actually, because I thought the same thing, but sounds mad. Yeah. They're spraying this radioactive brine on roads as a de-icer. 2 states have now banned it in America. That's how mad is that doing?
Interesting that you should mention TTIP, because it seems to me that Dave and George up in headquarters have got this cunning plan. They drill these holes down, and on the argument being that they're looking for shale gas, but it sort of doesn't matter really, because if they do find shale gas and then they decide to use boreholes to dump nuclear waste, if TTIP comes in and they are refused permission to extract the shale, the shale company can then sue the government for lost profits. Is that not the case?
We think that's happening already, yes.
Because it's happening in Canada.
Yes, because that's why we're not refusing to go ahead with fracking, in spite of the fact that the price has dropped out of the market.
It's sort of intimately connected with TTIP.
Yes.
Potentially it is. I mean, does everyone here know what TTIP is? No, okay, because I know we're always guilty of using acronyms too freely in these events. TTIP is a Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which is currently being negotiated between the European Union and the United States, and our government are big supporters of it. One of the clauses in TTIP, which has been particularly controversial, would provide private companies with an opportunity to effectively sue public authorities if they do things that are could be damaging to their business. So that's what we're kind of referring to here. Now, the progress of that through the European Parliament has been slower than our government might have liked, partly because there's been quite a lot of opposition to it. Molly, who I work for, who's one of our 6 MEPs in the South West, has been a very outspoken opponent of TTIP for exactly the kind of reasons that we're talking about here now. Some of you may have seen her debate the subject with Simon Hoare in Blandford towards the end of last year. If you don't, probably haven't got time to go into too much detail tonight because it's an immensely complicated trade agreement that they're looking at. But there are lots of resources online. If you Google TTIP, there's lots of further information about it online, and it's not too late to write your elected representatives about that one too.
But also Australia, which we've just been looking at in this film, decided to go for to ban some of the advertising on tobacco, and they were successfully sued under TTIP. This is the government is sued on a democratic decision. They were sued for withdrawing their tobacco advertising, and the courts that decide the penalty are in secret. And guess who pays the penalty? All the citizens do. So under TTIP, there will be secret courts deciding on the penalties, and of course, it'll be us that pays it. So TTIP really isn't a good idea. And all these things are watering down our democracy. In fact, there would be no democracy if that sort of thing goes ahead.
And I would add to that as well that it does make you wonder if this is the reason why the government wants to get rid of the Human Rights Act as well. But I'll just leave that for you. Gentleman at the back has a question.
I wanted to address the question of viability. Obviously, the price of gas is down at around $2 for a barrel or whatever it is later for gas. And viability for fracking, again, comes down to the radioactive materials that they're going to legally be able to put down the well afterwards. And we're not just talking about fracking liquids here, but we're talking about depleted plutonium, of which this country has a major supply in Sellafield. And the government has been looking for a way of getting rid of this. So there's your viability.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't confirm whether that's what their thinking is, but the suspicion is there, isn't it? Absolutely. And given that we're waiting currently for an announcement about what's going to happen about the proposed Hinkley C new build nuclear power plant in Somerset, the problem is only going to get bigger given that they seem to put all of their eggs in the 2 baskets, really, in terms of nuclear energy and fracking.
Well, just to keep it in perspective, the amount of radiation that you get only becomes really harmful when you concentrate it. So once you've drilled lots and lots of wells and bring up a lot of radioactive material, then obviously the hazard is going to increase. It's very small compared to the sort of radiation that's used in a nuclear power station or weapons. But because it's in concentration, because when we drill it and bring it up, it has to be stored somewhere. That pile becomes a hazard. It is a hazard, and it has to be disposed of again. And the trick is to put it back down another well where there's no share. And that will deal with that successfully. But if they then use the same technique for getting rid of plutonium or much more radioactive material, then it really is a hazard. And we shouldn't really be doing that sort of thing. But we don't have access to that. They're just not being honest about it. Has anybody here heard the government say, when they were talking about the Hinkley Power Station, that they're signing up the deal with the Chinese and EDF? Has anyone heard anything about what they're going to do with the nuclear waste? Not a squeak. And that's the sort of thing that we should be hearing a lot more about.
It suggests they either don't know, which would be quite troubling in itself, or there's something they don't want to tell us.
There's something they don't want to tell us.
Exactly.
Yes,
Charles, would you just like, for the sake of the audience here, just like to take us through the Halliburton loophole and just explain what that is, because it's very important.
Halliburton loophole, yes. Thank you. When the Bush administration was running America, the people in Bush were actually part of the biggest American oil company, that's Halliburton. So George Bush, the Bush family, and Rumsfeld and Cheney and all those others were Halliburton executives. So effectively, the American government, the most powerful government in the world, was run by an oil company. So what they did was they came up with a wonderful idea, which has been nicknamed the Halliburton loophole, where with the American Environmental Protection Agency, everybody has to get permission and declare what they want to put underground, except for the oil industry, which can put underground whatever it likes. And that clause is the Halliburton loophole. You can just type Halliburton loophole into your browser and you'll see all about it. But the Halliburton loophole is one that permits the oil industry to put things underground without actually declaring it. And effectively, the UK has signed up to the same deal. In fact, it almost looks as if we're run by America these days, because almost everything that they've done is being copied here. That's what makes us think that TTIP has already been signed, because we're doing exactly the same things. Yes?
Just when we're writing to local politicians and national MPs and those sorts of things, can we clarify what the main parties in the UK, what their position is on fracking?
Well, I can tell you, as I work for a Green member of the European Parliament, that the Green Party are completely opposed to fracking, not just because of the potential health and environmental risks, but also because we need to be decarbonising our economy and moving towards fossil-free forms of energy production in order to tackle global climate change. The Conservative Party have made it quite plain what their position is on it, I think. Lib Dems, Anna, do you know for sure? I won't know. I think the Lib Dems, locally, certainly, have been quite outspoken on this, so yeah. I'm assuming.
Locally, and certainly in Poole, the Liberal Democrat groups are totally opposed.
And the same
in fact, a short time ago, I put a motion to Poole Council, which the Tory administration rejected. So we've already started our fracking campaign.
Excellent.
But unsuccessfully so far.
And I know in North Dorset as well, from a letter that I saw in the Blackwood Bell magazine, which Hugo, the parliamentary candidate for the Liberal Democrats, had written in, that locally in North Dorset they take the same position.
Is there anything because I think national Lib Dem policy is for fracking, isn't it?
I can't speak for the Lib Dems, I'm afraid.
Perhaps I could clarify.
Sure.
As one of the Democrat Labour Party individuals, I would say that amongst the MPs during the coalition there was quite a mixed views, but there were a considerable number like myself who voted for the moratorium, as Prue knows, very effective lobbying, amongst other things, and it was extremely disheartening to see right across the political spectrum really that you couldn't even garner enough support for a moratorium, which seemed a pretty sensible thing under the circumstances.
And there have also been...
and I personally, I have been on record as
Actually, there's almost a separate country now. There's Westminster and the rest of us. And that's the problem.
Can I also, to add to what Annette was very helpfully saying there have been attempts as well to get a moratorium through the European Parliament, which have also struggled to garner sufficient support. So that would be something to contact all of your MEPs on. We have 6 in the southwest, only one of them is Green. I think there are 2 Conservatives, 1 Independent and 1 UKIP, but that's 2 UKIP. Or maybe it's 2 UKIPs, not 1 Independent. Does anyone here know what Labour's coherent position is on fracking? Because it's a job to know what their policies are and anything at the moment, really, given their leadership.
Well, actually, I don't think any of the parties really have enough information. This is one of the biggest problems. There just isn't enough information out there, which really brings us...
I'm in the Labour Party, and I mean, Jeremy Corbyn has very good green credentials.
Yes.
And his plan, which he's working on really, is to take the power of the Bank of England and rather have it invest in mortgages and things like that, he wants to channel that money into green technologies, and that is on record.
Good, glad to hear it, yes. But strangely enough, the press is not really highlighting this. How many of you know that Scotland plans to be independent of fossil fuels for its electricity by 2020. Now they've got a wonderful underwater tidal turbine scheme, and yet we don't hear about it down here. We've been battling to get one put in here at Portland for a long time, and it's been kicked into the long grass all the time. But Scotland's going ahead, and we don't hear about it. Now, renewable energy is taking free energy sources. This energy is moving around in tides, in the sun and the wind. It's free. You don't have to dig it up or do anything. There's no energy in it. It also does the conversion process for you for free. It actually turns the turbines by itself. And all you do is take the electricity out. Now that is, the sun and the wind and everything else have been powering the world for a long time. It grows all our plants. So we should be using that a lot more, and we're intelligent enough to do it. So what it is that's stopping it seems to be money, invested money. And people have invested so much in the oil industry and in the extraction industries that they just can't pull out of that and change to something else. And I think it's that inertia that we're trying to get round by the divest from fossil fuel pressure. We really need to get them to divest from that, and then we'll see them, change to renewable energies much more readily.
Yeah, I mean, I think an important thing to add to that as well before we wrap up, because we're getting slightly short on time, is that there's a whole body of work going on at the moment, and Mark Carney from the Bank of England has raised this on the whole subject of the carbon bubble, because it's not just governments and private investors and oil and gas companies that have invested a lot of money in the fossil fuel industry. Unfortunately, you and I have too, through our pension funds. So another thing that I would encourage you to do is to write to your pension fund. Hopefully you'll have more luck getting a response than I did when I wrote to mine, which is Dorset County Council, and ask them what they're doing about disinvesting your money, your pension money, from the fossil fuel industry. And if you're interested in finding more out about the carbon bubble, which suggests that it could pop at some time, which puts your pensions at risk, there's lots of information about that online. Now, I know there were other people that had their hands up. Okay, go on then, one last question, if you haven't asked one yet.
Nearly 40 years ago, I was Friends of the Earth coordinator in Wimborne. And nuclear power was the big thing then. It was on the way up. And I used to go around to village halls with a friend who was a geographer, and we used to give lectures on what it really meant. But there was a huge amount of government disinformation. It was to be the cheapest electrical source, and all manner of other things about it. But it was in fact the dearest of electrical sources. The reason it was very cheap was we wanted nuclear warheads, and you can only get plutonium from reactors. And we built lots of reactors to make sure that we had loads and loads of what you might call weapons-grade fuel. And that was the main thing behind it. And that's why there is something behind this, and its government will give you total disinformation, because they will employ scientists who will say yes to anything.
And even better, even more than that, our energy minister, Tony Benn, at the time, wasn't even aware that they were making weapons-grade plutonium. It was even kept from him. And that's listed in Hansard, and if you read Tony Benn's book, you will see it in there. He was horrified to learn that there was a secret program, and that's why his Atoms for Peace was being misused to create weapons-grade plutonium for America.
Sorry you haven't got to everyone's questions. If you haven't got, I'm sure Charles will be here for a few minutes after, so if there's a burning question that we haven't asked, come and see either Charles or myself. And I'll just hand over to Anna to have the last word.
Okay, thank you very much, Charles, again, for coming and being a fan of knowledge. You've got another talk coming at the end of the month, end of February?
Got one coming up on 13th in Poole.
Yeah, so there's a couple of dates to mention. On the 13th of February, there's an event in Poole about divesting Dorset from fossil fuels. Molly Scott Cater is going to be talking, and sort of following on from this thing where, the oil industry, the reason that they're being able to change agreements don't go through and that TTIP agreements do go through. So it's really important that we start to take notice of where our money is invested. And also, I think the idea of this kind of meeting on the 13th is also to look at what, as we as Dorset can do to start putting more positive projects forwards. Unfortunately, the wind farm got turned down on Thursday in Dorchester, even though there were more speakers in favour this time than against. It was a real shame. So next Saturday on the 6th, there's a meeting 4 till 6 in Upton Community Centre, and that's to try and get all the Dorset anti-fracking groups together, so that we can make sure we can coordinate with Swanage and Purbeck and Wimborne and all of the groups that are springing up all over the place, and make sure that we really get together a really solid organising team, and make sure we're, raising awareness and making sure everyone's got the information at their fingertips. So if anyone wants to come along to that. We're going to try and have an event here in a few weeks' time to make sure we get a monthly group together so that we can really support the other groups, and we'll be ready for when the first fracking planning application goes so that everyone can support down there. There is a little donations pot at the back. If you found this a useful event and useful information, please chuck a quid or a couple of quid in there to help us pay for the room and future events, so that'd be really good. There's also a big pile of printed out petitions, so please feel free to take a couple away with you and get them signed by people at work. It's a really good way to start a conversation with people about it, and then hopefully if you can return them to us. If you take one away, make sure you know where to return it to, and then we will be able to keep in touch with people as well. If they give us an email address, then we can organise the next event to get together. Thank you very much.
And just to give you an idea of how government works, they've invested civil service pensions in fracking.